And just as it were, just a week or so ago, supposedly, and I think it's probably for good this time, Ozzy Osbourne has finally thrown in the towel. That is not what I meant by that. God damn. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. So in addition to skewing a few crucial facts about a few of the records I talked about last update, namely Christian Linderson only singing on the very first Count Raven record, none of the ones afterwards, including the one I talked about, and Brendan Radigan being a permanent member of Pagan Altar, just releasing a full album with them a few months ago. I've clearly been living under a rock, too busy with collecting clear retro game consoles and controllers and all manner of other clear things to know when albums are coming out or who's singing for who. Off the game. I'm off the YouTube game. I'm trying to get back on top of things. On top of all that, I may have prophetically guessed that Ozzy Osbourne was to pass away. Hopefully I didn't put it out into the universe that he was going to pass away. I'm guessing that this last concert thing took place because he was probably pretty close and pretty sick. Somebody who is better with words than I put it out on social media that he effectively played his own wake with his favorite people around him, which is a wonderful thing. Another person who's also better with words than me on Facebook was talking about how in the 80s, nobody talked about music from the 40s. It wasn't relevant. And I don't know if it says anything good or bad about present times, that, you know, we're kind of like Ouroboros eating its own tail culturally, not coming up with anything new. But bands like Black Sabbath and Motorhead and the like are still as relevant and important to culture as they were ages ago when I was just a little guy, you know. So that's all kind of food for thought. I thought I would memorialize the man by talking about the first 6 Black Sabbath records, in addition to just kind of discussing a few other things that come to mind, a couple other records on top of that, but mostly the first 6. The first 6 are a kind of a staple for a lot of people for good reason. I think Henry Rollins is quoted as saying, "That's all you need in life," something to that effect. He also quipped that, why aren't we naming natural disasters after the first 6 Black Sabbath records? When El Nino was a thing, destroying a lot of the coastline, he was like, that's such an innocent sounding name. What about the first Black Sabbath records, first 6 Black Sabbath records? The first 6 are the heavy hitters. I think as somebody that celebrates almost the entire catalog, I think that Never Say Die deserves a lot more love. I think the Dio records deserve a lot more love, but the first 6 are iconic for a reason. Massively influential on everything. As I touched upon in my last update, talking about doom metal, of course, a genre that wouldn't exist at all without Black Sabbath, or would be markedly different, at least. When I got into them, this was an era right before the World Wide Web was launched. You know, we're talking early to mid 90s. I think people in the know were into bands like Black Sabbath and Motorhead and stuff that I'm not as into, like Kiss or whatever. But a lot of things were very all about current day and whatever the next new thing was, which at the time was stuff like grunge, funk metal a little bit before that. Obviously, adjacent to that, you had college rock and REM and all that going on. Hip hop was getting bigger all the time. So people didn't really look at Black Sabbath with the same level of reverence that they started to, I want to say, late 90s, early 2000s. Those Black Sabbath tribute records came out. Those Nativity and Black albums came out. And of course, Ozfest started taking off. Not long after that, you had the reality show. And, you know, I mean, you can say what you will about the man becoming sort of a caricature of himself or whatever you want to say about Sharon. But at the end of the day, I'm glad he got his bag. You know, I'm glad that same goes for Motorhead before they moved on, before Lemmy moved on to the next plane of existence. It seemed like a lot of this stuff kind of blew up, and there's a lot of merchandising, and there's a lot of people, you know, WWE had Motorhead songs for entrances for Triple H and all that, and they got kind of to be the household name that they always deserve to be. And when an artist becomes that and becomes that huge and they mean something very specific to you personally, it does kind of feel like your special thing is being tainted a little bit. But, you know, you can't be goofy about that kind of stuff. For me, I have a very, very, very special place for all that kind of stuff. My curiosity about Black Sabbath started when I picked up the first record by a little band called Alice in Chains when Facelift came out in 1991. And I can't remember who was being interviewed, if it was Lane Staley or Jerry Cantrell or whoever, maybe everybody in the band. It was in Metal Maniacs or Metal Edge or one of those. Don't remember. Hit Parader for all I remember. But they specifically cited Black Sabbath as a really strong influence. And I said to myself, okay, I got to check this out. It wasn't long before I did a little research, reading about Faith No More, the Faith No More liner notes and The Real Thing, seeing that War Pigs was a cover. Came to discover a couple of their songs have been covered here and there. So I went to my local Phase drugstore, which was a chain in the Northeast. They always had a huge rack of tapes, and got a very cheap copy of the self-titled. And I remember being disappointed because it was a bare bones copy. I'll never forget just the cover. You know, the sort of black square underneath to make the ratio correct there with just plain white font, Black Sabbath with the Warner Brother logo. And nothing on the inside, pure white on the inside, which was always massively disappointing to me that there wasn't like a proper fold-out J-card with lyrics or members or anything. And I remember writing "what no lyrics" on the inside in like orange highlighter. The weirdest things I remember from childhood, and I don't remember what I had yesterday for dinner. Actually, yeah, I do. It was a Factor meal, and it was a taco bowl, and it was delicious. But anyways, this was the first one I got, and for me as a kid that was already listening to some kind of almost thrash stuff at the time, Scatterbrain, funk thrash, and a few other things that were a little bit heavier. I'd been into Metallica for a year or two at that point. It was weird wrapping my head around how this was of its era, but still heavier than most things I'd heard. Namely, it sounded production-wise like my parents' music. My stepdad was a big fan of Led Zeppelin, tried to get me listening to them. I liked a few songs, you know, but not a lot of their other stuff. When it got too bluesy or folky, I wasn't in the mood for Zeppelin. You know, I'd hear stuff like Cream, you know, all the stuff from the 60s that had fuzz to it. This was like a really evil version of that to me, and I couldn't quantify how that made any sense. The first song, the title track, the titular title track, I also blew my mind how that was recorded in 69, I believe, and it went into that crazy fast gallop at the end that was just so ahead of its time in terms of sounding almost like a punk song or something like that. This version does not have Wicked Woman on it, although the tape I bought said it did and lied.
Oh, why does it lie?
And it is weird. That is an oddball song. It does feel off with the flow of the rest of the album. I think it was recorded separately or something. I didn't really research into that. That's not on this anyway. You know, the bass line, but before NIB, classic. Probably my favorite song off of it is The Wizard. I still get that song stuck in my head all the time. Somehow they made harmonicas cool. You know, there's plenty of other bands that do too, but it's kind of not the easiest thing to pull off. And it's a great kind of nod to blues, making blues evil, making this whole sound of the era their own thing. Very, very heavy. Love the first one. Obviously, this one's a big influence on a lot of the Doom stuff, of course. Then, of course, you get Paranoid. Then you get Paranoid. Then you've got Paranoid next. Recorded, I think, the same year. It's crazy the output of artists at the time when they had record labels behind them really funding them. I think this was recorded either very early the next year or around the same time. It was like within a 6 to 8 month period, if I remember reading correctly. Once again, I haven't really bothered doing any research, so It'll probably end up biting me in the ass again, but what are you going to do? Cool gatefold on this pressing of it, too. Just these guys chilling in a field. I said for years I'm really sick of side one, or really sick of the whole album is what I used to say. And then a buddy of mine was like, hey, man, side two. I know you're sick of War Pigs and Paranoid and Iron Man. And Planet Caravan's like this kind of weird, psychedelic mellow song. But all three of those, or all four of the songs on side two completely kill, especially Electric Funeral. That's such a good song. And Hand of Doom. Fairies Wear Boots. Recently, not that long ago, I think it was Bill Ward. It was a member of the band that wasn't Ozzy. It was a song about Bill or whoever getting beat up by skinheads in the late 60s, which is kind of funny because I've seen old pictures of Ozzy, and he does almost look like an old school like suede head boot boy before growing his hair out. And I know he had that weird period in the early 80s where he kind of like freaked out and shaved his head too. But at any rate, obviously this is the most like go-to common Black Sabbath album out of the first six, but it has its strong points for a reason. I mean, yeah, it's been a long time since I've listened to War Pigs, Paranoid, Planet Caravan, or Iron Man. But they're still incredible songs, even if I played them into the ground when I was younger. And Paranoid, I mean, that type of speed has been covered by the Dickies. Not on an official recording, but I saw a video of the Bad Brains covering it. It certainly is like a proto-punk or hardcore song. It's awesome. I think there's a scene in, I want to say Sid and Nancy, or maybe it was the recent Sex Pistols biopic, but they're listening to Paranoid while playing darts, the Sex Pistols. Then we got Master Reality. This is, I don't even know what pressing this is. Warner, I get. This is so beat up, I can't even see what label it's on. It used to belong to K. Scrippo, though. Nice guy. A little bit there, you can see how there used to be a price tag on this from Oliver's Records, which was the record store in Syracuse on Marshall Street, where I used to get all my LPs, and I'm sure I didn't pay more than like $5 for this. Had it for ages, had it since high school. A lot of people say this is often the most influential on the doom scene, the stonery doom scene, the trad doom scene, probably even like the epic doom scene, just that kind of, those kind of riffs, those really woody, rich, dragging, heavy riffs on that, the deep, solid groove to them. And, I mean, it's Master Reality. It's possibly their best album by a lot of people's standards. One of my favorites, also a little heavily played to me, so I don't always grab for it, but it is fantastic. I saw a straight edge band, Endpoint, cover Sweet Leaf once. That was a lot of fun. After Forever, another band. I don't mean to go into like how many bands covered these songs, but it is interesting to note. Shelter, post Youth of Today, Hare Krishna band covered After Forever and made it kind of Vedic and like chanty, which is a really good, cool cover. I'll leave a link to that. Solitude, one of my favorite like sad songs. One of the better mellow Sabbath songs, I'd say. Just really dark and sad. I think I'm going to go home, sit down and moan. You do that, Ozzy. You earned it, brother. And of course you got Children of the Grave, which is another early Gallop, along with like Highway Star by Deep Purple, like an early proto heavy metal song, really, really crushing tune. Great song about the youth rising up, I love the Orchid instrumental, the intro on the second side there too, that beautiful like neoclassical guitar. Lovely record. If I had to pick a favorite one, I know a lot of people's favorite is Volume 4. This is probably mine. This is a super partied on copy. Shamefully, I don't even have this in a sleeve, like a dust sleeve on the inside. I need to rectify that. My favorite song of all time is Under the Sun. The pretty much like, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to think. I'll do whatever I want with my life kind of lyrics. And I know most of the lyrics from what I read, remembering correctly, are by Geezer Butler. But he did a great job with that one. And this is when they start getting a little bit weirder. They already were pretty weird, but going into like FX, which is just, I don't know, an echo chamber or something with like boinging noises. That sort of like marimba action going on at the end of Supernaut is awesome. Laguna Sunrise, the pretty little instrumental. Great record. Again, probably a pretty heavy influence on a lot of doom metal, I would think, considering like Sleep just completely ripped off the cover for one of their records, and massive debt is owed to this and the previous for all the Sabbath clones, I guess, all the doom metal stuff. Then Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. I remember a friend of mine, we were teenagers and we were dumb kids just starting to meet girls. And I think a friend of mine had an early, bedroom encounter with a young lady. And he's like, dude, she totally looks like one of the girls from the cover of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath with no clothes on. So, just weird things you remember from high school and stuff. But, that riff, that super heavy riff, that opener is awesome. National Acrobat, one of my favorite riffs of all time. My old band used to just use that as an intro, just playing that over and over again. And we were like a metallic hardcore band. Again, Who Are You? Weird Moog synths on that and everything. Just this odd kind of like I don't want to say proto-industrial because that's kind of going, it was very almost like krautrock influenced or something weirdly. Spiral Architect, what an amazing closer, just an epic song. Love Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Of course, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, famously covered by Anthrax. They did a great job with that. Sabotage, even more towards like weird prog and psych kind of direction on this, I feel. Hole in the Sky, just a shit kicker of a riff opening that. Just super heavy. Symptom of the Universe, yet another kind of proto speed heavy metal kind of song covered by Sepultura, who barely really changed that much to the guts of the song and just, had gruntier vocals essentially. Just naturally heavy tune. The Writ, that's a creepy tune. I really, really love The Writ. And Superstar, Thrill of It All. I remember hating Am I Going Insane? I had the We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll comp. I don't have a copy of that to show off. I'd love to get a proper copy of that. I think I had it and sold it because I figured at the time I wasn't as into hoarding things. And I figured, I have all these songs. There's no exclusive material on this, but it was a beautiful gatefold with the woman in the, like, holding the cross in the coffin on the inside. I'd like to get a copy of that again if I can find one at a reasonable price. But yeah, this one always felt a little weirder to me, a little bit more like scary and out there and drug-addled, which is par for the course. I worshipped Black Sabbath, Paranoid, and the self-titled from 8th grade into 9th grade. And then I got into other stuff. I got pretty deep into death metal. I started going to local hardcore shows, so I was seeing all that stuff like Earth Crisis and Bloodlet and all that stuff start to blow up. So that was kind of taking up a lot of my attention. And then in 10th grade, for whatever reason, I started deep diving into bands like Winter and St. Vitus, of course, and My Dying Bride, anything that fell under the umbrella of doom. As I was talking about last update, it was, not as separated out nerdily as it via Metal Archives as it is now. And it was around then that I'd say for about the first 6 or 7 months of 10th grade, I mostly just listened to only Black Sabbath and with a little bit of St. Vitus. And these past 3 albums or so had a lot to do with that. I didn't even have proper copies. I just had dubs, crappy dubs that I listened to, and I just worshipped it. I loved it so much, and I still do. Then we've got Live at Last. This is the live record. A lot of people kind of crap on this, the sound quality. There are bootlegs and really well-recorded, soundboard recordings of a bunch of different concerts over the years, all throughout the 70s. There's like a really good one from France, I want to say, and then there's a really good one in California. I'm not a total buff on like live Sabbath stuff. I own a bunch of it. I just don't have it committed to memory, like which ones are where. But there's a much better sounding recordings than this, but I do really like this. It's kind of a little bit blown out. It's super heavy, it's a little bit sloppy, but it's awesome. I love Live at Last. You got Tomorrow's Dream, Sweet Leaf, Killing Yourself to Live, Cornucopia, Snowblind, Children of the Grave, War Pigs, Wicked World, and Paranoid. Had it on tape for years. I got a copy of this real cheap, like $15, I don't know, decade or so ago, but beautiful Beautiful condition record too. This is in great shape. I don't even know what this originally came out on. I don't think it was Warner. I could be wrong though. NEMS, N-E-M-S recordings. Then, Technical Ecstasy. Never really got into that. I'm going to rectify that now. There's very few Black Sabbath records I don't own. There's a few that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I necessarily need 7 Star or that other one with Ice-T on it. But I'm probably going to check them out at some point. Technical Ecstasy, I keep hearing, a revisionist take of like, yeah, it's actually pretty good. Like I said, I think I've listened to it like maybe once. So we're going to skip that. But then we got Never Say Die, which I love this record. It almost kind of reminds me of what Iron Maiden did with No Prayer for the Dying. They did these really kind of expansive, heady, concept-ish sort of records with lots and lots of synthesizers and almost like a sort of a prog rock thing going on. And then they came out with No Prayer for the Dying, which a lot of people are kind of meh on, but I like that record. Do I like it as much as Number of the Beast or whatever? Not really. But it's got some solid rockers on it. And this has some weirdness on it, of like outside instrumentation. But I do enjoy this. I just spun it again. It's a little bit more like almost kind of positive sounding and upbeat, especially the title track. The title track is one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs. I couldn't really pick most of the other songs on it out of a lineup because I don't listen to this super often. But I just gave the whole thing a spin while playing some games, just to kind of stir up my memories again. And it's got some really great catchy stuff on it. Ozzy sounds good on it, I think. Pretty great. And then Ozzy solo stuff, a lot of it I'm not like super intimately familiar with. I know all the hits, obviously, Ultimate Sin and all that, but I mean, Blizzard of Oz, this was an early purchase of mine as a kid. I had it on tape, grabbed this copy, I don't know when. This is a promo copy. But you can't go wrong with just the songcraft on this. Obviously, it's a lot poppier than the stuff he did with Black Sabbath, but Randy Rhoads was a beast of a guitarist. That iconic neoclassical opening, The Crazy Train, it's one of those things where when I played guitar regularly, I learned how to play it, and I was like, yes, I'm a virtuoso. Just a cleverly written riff. And probably Mr. Crowley, I'd say, is my favorite. Solo Ozzy song, little tune about a little guy named Al, little chubby wizard. We all love him.
And I, the great beast, Sir Crowley, improve the mighty art of hermetic. Whoa. Stand down. Show that lunatic out. Let's see if the chubby wizard can fly.
I'm still not sure what No Bone Movies is all about. Is that about porn or something? Is it an anti-porn song? Was Ozzy an early progenitor of the no-fap movement? I don't know. It is funny how Suicide Solution is indeed it's like an AA song, anti-self-harm song, and they hit all kinds of problems with the PMRC about it. So, and it is funny. I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, with things becoming softer in the public eye and people's public image being repaired, and that being for the best, especially being compensated for one's art and everything is important. But it was really interesting seeing the butt end of the Satanic Panic era where people were freaking out over heavy metal music and things like that. I mean, when I was in school, there were still issues with people thinking that I worship the devil for whatever reason, that sort of thing. The whole biting the head off the bat stuff where it was this game of telephone and exaggerated. It just makes me a little bit nostalgic and a little bit wistful for a time when listening to an artist seemed dangerous. It's made you seem like a scary dude to be into such things. Even Dungeons and Dragons, which was the most harmless, benign, dorky thing ever. And I feel like people like myself that are pushing 50 and grew up during this time, it's really hard to explain it to people that might be generations below us, because we live in a time where there's a nonstop feed of like war footage being dispersed across social media with like full-on gore and everything. And there's like mass shootings all the time. And reality is a lot more scary now than any heavy metal record when I was growing up. And I miss the innocence of like this guy being the scary guy, this lovable, hard to understand British dude, who sang about wicked things. You know what I mean? But anyway, the record's definitely carried me through some rough times. Still one of my favorites of all times, band-wise. Thanks for everything, my man. You will be missed. I'll be back on track talking about more like random weird psych and kraut stuff, maybe some more Doom next week. Trying to make this a regular thing and crank out a video every Thursday. It's hard to balance that because, you know, this is not what I do for a living, but I appreciate everybody watching and commenting. Keep it up. I might start to do a little bit more in the way of maybe a Patreon, maybe a Discord server, maybe both, maybe not either. I'm still hemming and hawing. If you have any thoughts on that, if that seems like something you'd be interested in, put it in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do, if you want, if you enjoyed this. If not, that's fine. You have a good day anyway. All right, take care. Thanks. I'm out.